my relatives, I've invited, and on the line we have Miss Shar, Suke, and Miss Suke is with the Berkeley Indigenous Peoples Day Committee, and it's Indigenous Peoples Day itself, which is what the powwow is also based upon. Berkeley was the first city across the entire United States that first declared Indigenous Peoples Day, and Shar and Suke and her peoples here, the intertribal community of the Greater Bay Area of Berkeley, specifically, who helped co-found and establish the powwow and indeed declaring Indigenous Peoples Day. So, first up to you, Shar, for that achievement, and please, if you can reintroduce yourself, and welcome to Bay Native Circle.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Segoli, my relatives, Sharni Yungyats, Ongadagana Diadoren. They call me Shar. I'm Oneida. And it's an honor to be on Bay Native Voices. It's been about 18 years since I had that opportunity. And this year, 2022, was the 30th anniversary of our intertribal powwow in the Indian Market in downtown Berkeley at Martin Luther King Park. We had that back on October 8th, just a couple of Saturdays ago. As usual, it was a beautiful day. How this event got started had to do with the, 1977, there was an United Nations sponsored international conference. Representatives from 120 Indian nations met with human rights activists at this conference, and they resolved to transform the 500th anniversary of Columbus's landfall. They resolved to transform this into an occasion to strengthen our process of continental unity and struggle towards our liberation. There were delegates from Northern California, from Berkeley specifically, that went to where this was held, I believe, in Quito, Ecuador, and came back and formed a group called Bay Area Indian Alliance for counter-quincentennial planning. Because, in other words, powers that be, non-native powers, said, hey, it's 500 years since this guy got lost and landed here. Let's do something about it. So there was going to be, Columbus time-looking ships that were going to flow into the bay, under the bridge, and all this. And, of course, from our perspective as Native people, why would you be welcoming this interloper, this gold digger, this slave trader, etc. in here like that? Why would we celebrate that? We need to be recognized, all the people that got trampled on and pushed out and mistreated. So, and then this group started pushing towards a coalition to coordinate 1992 activities with Indigenous leadership, at that time called Resistance 500. The U.S. Congress had chosen the Bay Area as a national focus for their planned quincentenary Jubilee Columbusian Oopla thing. And the Berkeley Resistance 500 said to the Berkeley City Council, let's set up a task force. All that started to happen, and the result was that in October of 1991, Berkeley City Council unanimously declared October 12th be commemorated annually here as Day of Solidarity with Indigenous People, and the following year, 1992, to be the year of Indigenous people. So that's how it got started from a grassroots organization that went to City Council, and City Council said, we are behind you 110% on this. And the very first year they met by the water with this small group of grassroots people, and I don't want to let go without saying who they were.
Please.
Millie Ketchishano Creek of Oklahoma. I've got in front of me a copy of, she was a co-founder. And when their 10th anniversary came up, she had just passed, and we had the powwow in her honor, and I was just reading what I've written in the program about my experience of her, and it moves me to tears. And I miss her very much. They went down by the water, and they had a dawn ceremony, and they had some songs, and that's the first thing they did. And then as kind of this movement grew and realizing that we needed more representation and to be more visual in the Bay Area, all these folks from relocation from the 50s and 60s, they really have a powwow, and let's get some Indian art there and Indian craft there, and that's what happened. So consistently, with the exception of a year there was fires and smoke in the air and COVID and these different things, that happened right there at Martin Luther King Jr. Park, right behind City Hall. And everybody I talked to loved it. I had the privilege of being a coordinator from 2000 to 2004. Billy's son and adopted daughter took over coordinating it for several years and did a great job. And then he needed a break, and I said I'd do it, and then COVID hit, so we had it online. And it's supported by Berkeleyans. It's supported by the city, and our Native community loves it. When I say, oh, we're having the powwow again this year, people are like, that's my favorite powwow. And that's the feeling. We had a good one this year. It was the 30th anniversary. And Lee Sprague, who's the lead Little River Band, is an Anishinaabe band. He's from the Great Lakes area. He's an activist and teacher and all kinds of things. He came out from up there. Marlene Watson, who was also, they were both co-founders at the beginning of everything 30 years ago. Marlene Watson, who is also an educator and got her degree from UC Berkeley, lived here for a number of years. She flew down from Alaska, and they came to commemorate that it's been going on for 30 years, and we're not about to let up, that we need to continue to be visible. And I think when it comes to, it's not a big powwow, but I think it's important because this powwow's got history. You know, college powwows, we've had a lot of great college powwows in the past. There's different organizations that put them on, you know, within a 30, 50-mile range of Oakland. And those tend to come and go. And on their base, you know, if it's a college or university, the first thing that gets cut in tough times is going to be, you know, the arts classes, the ethnic studies, so their budget gets cut. So, or you get a leader who retires and there's nobody from the next generation ready to pick it up. Evergreen College is no more. The Anza College powwow is no more. So the ways we reach out and support community and work with other communities, fortunately there's things like the American Indian Cultural District in San Francisco that spring up. So it's really great. Everything that goes on in Indian country is really great.
And Shar, if I may ask you, and as an Oneida person, your knowledge of powwows itself, can you share to the listeners, many of the non-Indigenous or those that are not familiar with what goes on at a powwow? Sometimes people take it in different ways, you know, what Hollywood has done to the term itself. Can you explain to us a little what a powwow is, you know, for people?
I would. Thank you. I will. I started going to powwow back home in Oklahoma when I was a little girl, and we only went to one a year, and it was like it was the thing I looked forward to 12 months every year, the only thing.
Ooh.
And it was not a contest powwow, and it was called Ed Mack's Sack and Fox powwow, and it was out in the country down a red dirt road outside of Shawnee. And you could hear the drums, and there weren't any signs, and there weren't any flyers because there was so much prejudice back then. They had to have gentlemen on the road approaching to see who was coming in because it was just going to be Native folks. And it was a beautiful time, and it's deep in my heart. We come together, you know, it's an ever-changing culture, but it's also essential to maintain what has gone before. There's so many things, so many ceremonies that have been lost and oppressed. Celebrations. Not every time Indians gather is it a sacred ceremony. It's a celebration, it's a combination, it's hard to explain. What we do is we honor the elements, we honor sacredness. We'll say a couple of prayers. You'll hear at least one or two prayers during the day. And we have singers and dancers. And we have people who bring their other art, their beadwork, their craftsmanship, drum making. They come And you can see and talk to the vendors and actually make the stuff and find out what they do. And it's all been, it's been influenced over the centuries by the invading peoples. It's colorful, it's diverse, and there's no place else you're going to go and see people dance in these different styles from all over the country. It might be what they do locally, what the original people do here in California. It might be Pomo style dancing. It might be that we've brought in a group who are representing their Aztec or their Suke ancestors by dancing that way. And there will be live drums. There's not going to be any recorded music. There's going to be live drums. Wow, live drums, there's just nothing like it. And the people who are on live drums, they practice. They go a lot of places. They are carrying songs from hundreds of years ago. They are creating new songs. And you just don't get this anyplace else. And we talk about our head staff, and we had a great head staff this year. Our MCs were Randy Tico, who's Ruth Daniel, and Roland Maya, who's Blackfeet, and Ruben Feather. We had a great bunch of people. Our head dancers were Bosiaki, the infamous, famous Eddie Madrill, a wonderful guy I've known for many. Dad and Madrill family. I respect and like them so much. His wife Sarah, their daughter Ellie, and they dress in their traditional clothing. That's going to mean buckskin. That's going to mean they may be wearing eagle feathers. It's going to mean that they've learned how to create these outfits directly. There's no classes. There's no, there's no kit. And they come from all over. And we have a really good time, and we have dances where we include the folks that are watching, and we invite them in, and we talk to them about what's going on. We say, this is a social dance. Come on out. We ask people to be respectful. We ask people, our events like this are drug and alcohol free. If you come and been inviting, and you will be asked to leave, because there is a sacredness, and I know people have a hard time waiting. They're dancing, but then they're praying, and what is this? But if you come, you have a great time in the daytime, and you can respectfully answer questions, ask questions of dancers and vendors. Usually we have a program which will outline a good way to be respectful, like you don't go up and just start pouring on somebody's buckskin, because you never know. I have staff that's 30, 40, or 50 years old. You never know if you see a dancer, whether or not they're carrying a fan that came from their grandparents who's no longer here. And these are items that have a huge emotional significance for us. So you'll see nothing else like it, really. We had a good one this year. The weather's always great. And then we have an opportunity also to talk about issues. We had, when we do things, we want to acknowledge who was here before, because these are the things that got stomped on, that, the invading cultures wanted to oppress, to repress, to wipe out, to get rid of. Well, we don't do that. I mean, we were trying to correct that as best we can. So this year we had Desiree Munoz, who's Costanon Lunson from south of here, to give the land acknowledgement. And that means talking about the people who aren't here anymore, the first feet that were on the ground of that part, the first feet, the first homes, the first fishers and hunters that were on the coast of our beautiful bay before we had covered it up with bridges and concrete to allow us to live this 21st century life. She did a wonderful job and sang beautiful songs from her culture. Mm-hmm. So we do things like that. We had the reason that Lee Sprague and Marlene Watson came down was to talk about the Turtle Island Monument. When Martin Luther King Park, a wonderful park that it is, was created decades and decades ago, they created a lovely fountain. It was perfect for its time. It's not maintainable in its current fashion. So 30 years ago, it was the same. It was already that way. There was no water. It wasn't running. It's got meaning to a lot of people in Berkeley. It's their fountain. It's no longer a fountain. 30 years ago, people from Markham started talking about, if this needs to be revamped somehow, and since we're honoring Native people in this park every year, it needs to be something that reflects the Native people and everybody. So Lee Sprague and Marlene and others had come up with some designs, and it's going to be called a Turtle Island Fountain. And Turtle Island is what many Native nations call North and South American continent, and it's pretty universal with us. And there's many stories in my tribe, Native tribe, are stories about Sharilane landing on the back of the turtle, and that becomes Turtle Island. It's a beautiful story. And so they came here to talk about that because that project kind of lay fallow. Things change. I mean, you got city business and politics and funding, and cities and entities go through transition. And so designs were made, turtle statues were made, and then, at some point there was less funding, and things flow and go and ebb like that. And Lee and Marlene came down and said, okay, we need to get together with the city. They did. There was a design charrette in August. I attended. Other members of the committee attended. We looked at all the ways this could be done. There's some things that, some engineers, some funders within the city may say this part isn't feasible, that part isn't feasible. But there's a lot of things to work on. We don't want to let it go. That part deserves a Turtle Island monument. I listened to the ideas of Lee and Marlene and landscape designers and folks from the city department, and everybody wants it to be inclusive. But it's hard to keep it going.
It's hard to keep it going, Shar. And I know this is almost like the 30-year proposal or so. I recall Lee Sprague talking about this even at a conference in New York. He would take that story, wanting that Turtle Island monument or sorts recognized in Berkeley. But getting just back in the time we do have Shar and the power of Berkeley, and yes, indeed there is a standard of ethics and protocol for the people that come to the powwows. It's an engaging time with vendors and food and the drumming, as you say, a time for people to engage, reconnect, longtime friends, and as you said, you look forward to it every year, the next 363 days for the next one in your neighborhood. And Shar, just to close, I want to say that it's also an honorable time there at the Powwow, very sacred ground. Sometimes there's honoring of people, such as we honored, gave recognition to Miss Courtney Cummings of Richmond area, I believe, and praying strong for her health and well-being. And there was acknowledgments that people were passed on, such as just the recent with Sashi Littlefeather. Any words that you have to share? There was a requiem where a mass church recognition service just last week, but in furtherance of Sasheen and her legacy.
I'm glad you reminded me. Thank you. It was not. Sasheen in recent years had been one of our head dance judges, along with Gilbert Blacksmith. The first time I met Sasheen in person was the year that Noe Ketchishana was training me how to do the powwow. And it was an interesting exchange, and I immediately gained a new respect for her that day. And she taught me some important things in her fierce way, in a good way. It is a big loss in our community. I'm struggling not to cry right now. Bear with me, please. So days before when she passed, we started to get calls. John called and said, we want to sing a song for Sasheen. Our MC, Randy Pico, said, I'd like to say a few words about Sasheen. Well, how to treat this? There's a number of different ways to treat a special and honoring a passing. We have, there'll be a special for somebody's kid who's going off to college. There was, throughout all the wars, most of the wars in the last century, there was honors of people who were going to war, who came home safely from war. So we do honorings, and Gino Berkeley, who's like an adopted nephew of her, and the son of founder, Lloyd Ketchishano. I call him like, how do we handle this, Gino? There's so many ways we can handle this. And he said, it's very recent. There's going to be a larger memorial for her later. And we discussed it, and I suggested that we do something I'd seen before in a way that I honored my mom when she passed. We put out an empty powwow chair. I think of it similar to that riderless horse you see sometimes in funeral parades. I put a shawl on it that I had bought because she'd asked for some people to buy shawls when her partner passed the previous year. We put her shawl on it. Kaylin Kimple brought over a couple of little photographs she just had in her wallet. And Randy spoke, and all nations sang, and we had a moment of silence. And then we moved into a round dance because Gino said people are going to need to feel like they need to move at that moment after that. So it was a very subtle way that we did it, and it seemed right to everyone that I heard from. And then, of course, I wasn't present at all of the funeral last week, and I got calls right away on Monday from people, did you see this article in the paper? I learned when I was at the funeral that there was an estrangement between her and her family, and I'd heard that before, but I knew her, but I did not know her. We weren't real close or anything, although she was certainly there for me at a couple of important moments in my life. I didn't want to read the article, really. It was all still too fresh. I'm extremely shocked. Someone calls himself a journalist and tells only one side of the story, and any other side of that story you can't get now because that person is gone on. We come from so many nations and so many backgrounds and so many experiences. I think a lot of us, we get to know people based on how they behave. And I will say that Sasheen brought dignity and respect to the circle. And as long as I have memory, I will never forget the moment she walked down that auditorium on TV. Regardless of her past, she was a symbol for every Indian sitting in front of a TV that night. She said words that needed to be said for 100 years. I don't know anybody else who had the courage to do that and to do it with dignity and resolve. Pretty much that's all I ever saw from Sasheen in the time that I knew her was dignity and resolve. And I respect that. I don't respect the way that she has been treated in so-called journalism in the last 10 days. And I concur with everything you said in your letter to the Chronicle, and I understand that that wasn't exactly how you wrote it. And I'm very, very sad and upset to hear that. I have a lot of respect for journalism, and I think without it, our democracy is lost. And it's pretty upsetting. And we did honor Courtney that day, and Courtney is doing pretty well, as I understand it. I want to say, thank you for asking me that question, and I don't think I can continue without getting more emotional. And
Thank you very much.
I have to add, our committee that has been so dedicated for 30 years is aging out. We won't be able to continue if we can't find folks who can consistently be present throughout the year. We get great volunteers every year that just, we work hard to get good volunteers, and when they show up, all the ones we get are amazing. The committee, Molly Law, Gino Barrichello, John Curl, Joaquin Cruz, Nanette, I'm probably leaving somebody out. Really incredible people. I cannot continue as the primary coordinator next year. It takes a lot of work. It's very much worth it. People who love powwow should reach out to their relatives and friends. Contact us. We're at ipdpowwow.org. There's an email you can find if you go there. We'll read your emails. You don't have to do the whole job every day of the year. You need to be able to show up at different times. And you need to be, if you don't have powwow experience, you need to be very willing to learn and adapt to what is. We really need help. This powwow might not continue. there have been influences within, I believe, the Arts Commission at Berkeley City Hall, such that it has influenced it. So now it's turning towards a very more professional, and this is a grassroots organization. And Berkeley is famous for its wonderful 1 or 2 day events started by grassroots groups, the Watershed Poetry Festival, the Himalayan or Tibetan Festival. There used to be a pagan festival. Because Berkeley is so inclusive and so supportive, but it's become a real challenge in recent years to work through the red tape that may apply really appropriate to large festivals like, I don't know, say maybe the Kite Festival. But for those of us who are grassroots, the cost and time and stress and money are getting really hard to manage. So there's conversations that need to take place. Some of our committee members are ready to write letters of protest. And then there's a responsibility on the part of our community that they need to step forward. And I know what people are doing. They're raising their kids. They're trying to get them through college, and it's working. We got a native female astronaut now, for gosh sake. We got doctors and lawyers, and I've got friends who are raising their kids and working part-time and working to get their degree in Indian law. And that's somebody who showed up this year and volunteered. Yeah. So I know life is a challenge in 21st century, but I'm begging my Native friends out there to contact us and see where we can get help to keep this going.
Thank you very much, Shar, and for your words and information on Berkeley powwow, and may it continue. And thank you very much.
I thank you for your support all these years, every year, and for always giving us a voice on KPFA, which is beautiful. Thank you to Bay Native Voices.
I want to thank Shar Suke for her words, information on the Berkeley powwow and Indigenous Peoples Day activity, and also her words for Sharilane Littlefeather. In fact, why don't we go into a letter that I wrote to the San Francisco Chronicle in response to their publishing an article on Sunday the 23rd. Well, my relatives, you might have also been reading the San Francisco Chronicle, and last Sunday the 23rd, an article on Sharilane Littlefeather and her passing, that she's not Native American. I was compelled to speak up for Sharilane, knowing her over the decades and her presence in the Bay Area and among friends. So I wrote a letter to the editor.
Indivisible.
Today,
separating myself from my parents is an impossibility. The imprint of my mother's hands will always be on my skin. Her voice will always be in my head, behind the face.
You can write to me at Gonzales with an S at KPFA.org if you have any questions or you want to pursue this topic. And if there's any other subject matter that you would like aired, you can write to me at that email, tgonzales at kpfa.org, and I'll look into it and see what we can do to bring that material to you, the listener. All right, here's the letter to the San Francisco editor, the full version, my relatives. To the editor, just off the trail with Indigenous Peoples Day, Monday, October 10, 2022, a day celebrated by all indigenous peoples across the Americas, Abayala, and at Alcatraz Island, the annual Sunrise Gathering, the San Francisco Chronicle published claims that the recently deceased Sharilane Littlefeather was not Native after all. Sadly, the Chronicle made no effort to examine the deeper meaning of what it means to be Native and who decides. I was born in Fresno, California, the child of migrant farm workers, campesinos from Mexico. I was sent to various foster homes since I was 7 years old until I was shortly drafted into the U.S. Army. I am a combat infantryman who served in Vietnam in 1968 and 69, disabled, service-connected, 2 Purple Hearts, while with the 9th Infantry Division, 3rd of the 47th Battalion, a mobile riverine force, and air mobile as well. I also became politicized during my Army experiences. I became aware of many injustices that existed then and now. When I returned to the States, I became active in the anti-war movement and the war on poverty in the Chicano community. I also began to explore the indigenous roots of my parents. I was part of the Chicano peoples struggling for equality and within the indigenous peoples. So many from Mexico and so many born here in El Norte undeniably carry indigenous ancestry. The Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences presented Sharilane Littlefeather with a public apology for her appearance at the 1973 Oscar Awards night on behalf of Marlon Brando for the movie The Godfather. I appreciate Sharilane Littlefeather for her clarity and bravery in confronting that room filled with people who reviled her. She stepped up at that moment for indigenous people's human rights, honoring the treaties, and for the warriors at Wounded Knees, 1973, which was at a crucial juncture at that time. Many of us grew up with our native origins, history, culture, spirituality, and traditions wiped out, whether it was education or by boarding schools, foster homes, the Catholic Church, or Hollywood. Native peoples have spent the greater part of the last 60 years shedding the false narratives of who is or isn't Native and building a global movement that speaks to Native peoples, whether they grew up as Mexican, Filipino, South Central Americans, or in some instances, a white American. The U.S. Census, for your information, 2012 final report listed Mexican American Indios as the 5th largest indigenous tribe in the U.S. Go figure. Today, we all share the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which was adopted by the UN General Assembly in September of 2007. The U.S. government was the last country to adopt the declaration in December of 2010. The Chronicle, too, missed the point. The criteria is not, as the Chronicle, San Francisco that is, ill-informed article suggests, whether you are an enrolled member of a federally USA recognized tribe, but rather whether you own your true heritage, self-identifying if need be, and live it every day. The road back home is long and sometimes hard. This is why we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. In the process of decolonization and rejecting the Papa Bulls, that is the doctrine of discovery, this is the legacy left by Sharilane Littlefeather. Aho, may she rest in peace. Antonio Gonzales, Kumtaak Chicano, AIM West Executive Director. There you have it, my relatives. So please write to me if you wish to carry this further. If you have any questions, and that's at T Gonzales with an S, Gonzales at kpfa.org.